Good morning, part twos. It's Friday, July the 17th, and I'm doing an early jump on scripture. Two reasons. One, I want to walk you through the changes in the assignments, and two, to introduce scripture, because I know you guys are going to be working ahead, and you can, a lot of you will be using the weekend. Some of you guys are already into it, so I don't want to delay that. Okay, this is huge. This is like the grand finale for this course. Okay, and usually scriptures at the beginning. So I have to tell you, since I knew I was going to be teaching this, I wanted to make changes to this course, but there was such little time between the spring and the summer session, it just didn't happen. But Jim and I have been talking all along as we've been teaching. There's three sections of part two. I've got two. He's got one, and there, we're always, talking about how things worked, and so we're always giving each other feedback as we go along. But coming into scripture, I was not comfortable with all the drop boxes, and I'll tell you why. Because as we've been doing this course, I just kind of felt like every time I was reading a Dropbox assignment, I thought, why am I the only person reading this? Like in the spirit of what this course is all about, you guys are trying to also teach each other, and then if it's a Dropbox, nobody has access to it but me, so it doesn't make sense. Okay, so this is me, and I've changed as a teacher. I mean, I've changed all along, but I remember when I first used to teach this course, I used to have like tons of handouts. Here, read this, read this, read this, read this. And now I'm seeing the value of less is more, number one. And number two, what do we want to get out of this, right? So we're trying to build community here and support. You guys have been awesome about responding to each other and putting such an effort into your discussion posts that it makes me so happy that this is happening. And especially yesterday, because I was focusing on my first section yesterday, and I was marking the assignments, and then I got into the Dropbox posts, and when you guys were responding to each other in patterns of human brokenness, I was just like so touched that you guys took such care to respond to each other, to minister to each other, to hold each other in this virtual community of support. I thought, oh, this is brilliant. And this course needs to be practical. Like, I hate the busy work aspect of teaching, and you guys need to be empowered as teachers to go in there and do the hard work, because faith is hard work. Teaching is hard work. And then we've got the added layer of faith. So I want to put you back into September with practical tools, and to be inspired and to say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I've got ideas. Yes, I can lead others, right? We started with, leader, follower. Like, you guys, once you take these courses, you got to go out there and say, I'm a leader in this, right? And then, especially, others have taken the course, but then you forget. You get caught up in the busyness and the, everything, and then you kind of forget. And sometimes people don't have good experiences in these courses, right? So you got to go out there. So this is what we've done. Okay, so Deuteronomy did not make sense to me from the beginning that it was a Dropbox assignment. Old Testament is heavy. A lot of people have no experience in Old Testament scripture, in Hebrew scripture. I prefer using the term Hebrew scripture as opposed to Old Testament, because we're a Judeo-Christian religion. This is a Judeo-Christian scripture. And, if I was studying in the presence of my Jewish brothers and sisters, for me to use the term Old Testament would not be very welcoming. Okay, so I'm going to try to get into the habit of saying Hebrew scripture and Christian scripture, which is our story combined together, right? And just a little bit of a side note too, like our Muslim brothers and sisters are also part of this tradition. Even though we don't share scripture with them, the Quran is a separate scripture, but we start our beginnings together with Abraham. So the three monotheistic religions are born out of the story of Abraham, who is the father of our faith, the father of many, right? So we know the story, Abraham and Sarah, too old to have children, but God promised them land and descendants, right? They get anxious that this is not happening. They get a concubine, Hagar. They have a child, Ishmael. But then Sarah gets pregnant, and Isaac is born. And so basically Hagar and Ishmael are kind of banished, and that's the beginnings of the Muslim faith. However, if you read the Quran and speak to someone who is Muslim, it's going to give you a different perspective because the story's written from a different perspective, okay? And that's just the way we are. We tell our story from our lived experience, right? But we have that connection, and in a lot of schools, we do have Muslim students, right? When I worked at Father Gates, huge inner city Mississauga school, lots of Muslims. It's a beautiful religion, really. If you get to know people, if you have any friends that are, it's a religion about peace. I had the privilege of walking with a Muslim Turkish man on my first Camino 10 years ago, and I learned so much. It was brilliant. It was probably one of the best educations I've had. And to be walking a Christian pilgrimage with a Muslim, and to be watching the depiction of the conflict between the Spaniards and the Moors in the churches. Like I remember seeing this tabernacle that was kind of on top of this, gory kind of, people being squished, Moors being, beaten down by the Spaniards. And, I was just like, oh my gosh. And it was just so brilliant to listen to his, reaction to this. And it was just so peaceful, and it was so intellectual, and so we had some really great conversations. And also our students that are Muslim teach us a lot too. I remember I had a student, Sana, when I was a chaplain at Gates, and she was so involved in my ministry in chaplaincy. And I remember one day asking her, Sana, oh, what parish do you belong to? And she's like, Miss, I'm Muslim. I'm like, I forgot, because she was so dedicated to all the work we did, and she was there for morning prayer, and she would volunteer to read, and so I said, how do you do it? You're a practicing Muslim. How do you bring the two together? She goes, Miss, I practice my faith at home, but when I come to the school, this is my faith community at school. I thought, beautiful. I wish more of our students who were Catholic kind of had that perspective. But also, if you have Muslim students in your school, I remember one chaplain told us that you do not put the Quran on the ground, right? They have those stands, right? And we as Catholics have no problem putting the Bible anywhere. When I'm on retreat, I put the Bible next to me. I'm sitting on the floor, right? But they've taught me that putting the Bible on the floor could be disrespectful. And I remember this group of Muslim girls, this one chaplain asked if the Bibles in the classroom that are on the bottom shelf could be put up on the upper shelf, because to them it was hard to see that the Bible was so close to the floor. Okay, so we can't let people hijack beautiful faiths, right? So terrorists have kind of taken over. The media has focused on that, but we share the beginnings together in our scriptures. We have a common beginning, our three faiths, although just the Judeo-Christian is in our scripture. Okay, so when we look at Deuteronomy, what I did was, the last time I taught this, I thought there was just stuff missing. So first of all, I went into my textbooks because I couldn't find anything online that was really good. Sorry, the sun is coming in here and it's getting kind of, I can't get rid of the rays there. Anyways, so I photocopied out of my textbook so that you kind of get a sense of what the Hebrew scripture is about. How does it made up? And it's very heavy into establishing a moral code for these people who are believing in this, having this relationship with this monotheistic God, right? Remember, they couldn't even say the name God. It was you could not say. That's why Yahweh has no vowels, because you're not supposed to be able to pronounce the name of God. It's so sacred, right? And so we have that establishment of this relationship between God and God's people, and God's people trying to figure out how to live with God and human nature, right? So we have all this, moral stuff that we're struggling with, because human nature has been the same since day one, right? We kind of make the same mistakes. And so Moses comes on the scene as the central character. God picks Moses. Moses is like, don't pick me, God. I have a speech impediment. Who's going to listen to me? I'm not perfect. God's saying, I'm going to pick you anyways. Just like with Jesus, Peter's like denies him 3 times, falls asleep on him, and Jesus saying, yeah, I still see something good in you. You're going to build my church. And God says to Moses, yeah, you're going to lead my people out of bondage into freedom. But Moses messes up. He never gets to the promised land. He falls short because he messes up, right? And so Deuteronomy, so we see the development. There's a lot of law. There's a lot of, it's just very kind of heavy narrative going on in here. And there's actually like 613 commandments. We're having a hard time following 10, right? But Deuteronomy, so here's the outline of the book of Deuteronomy that I've also included because I just felt there wasn't enough information. It kind of tells you the layout of the book. But it's interesting when you read the intro to Deuteronomy that I photocopied from the Catholic Youth Bible. That's why I use this Bible. There's extra information. When you read it, it's going to be like, oh, I see something. Moses is the grandfather. He's dying. He's in his deathbed. He's sharing the wisdom. He's teaching. Right? So there's a great connection. So as you're reading Deuteronomy, as you're getting into this book, think of Tuesdays with Maury, right? Okay, and then so I gave you a little bit more stuff so that you don't stress over doing Deuteronomy with, I got a Dropbox assignment, this assignment has to be la la la, and there's so much more stress over that. I want it to be a discussion. I want you to learn. I want you to feel comfortable with it. I want you guys to talk about it, not just me. I took this course in Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures. This is where I'm getting this information from, right? So that's the joy of learning. So that's the change number 1. Change number 2 is the topic 2, teaching as a prophetic voice. So we kept one Dropbox because technically we're supposed to have a Dropbox in every module. So we decided to keep the portrait of a prophet. I think we just didn't change the name, so just ignore that, okay? Portrait of a prophet, you're going to submit to the Dropbox. It's just going to be 2 paragraphs. It's just follow the questions, okay? And then the teaching as a prophetic voice we left as a discussion post, right? Yeah, I'm looking at the old one and the new one here. And that is going to be the creative part, because that was originally what you were going to submit into the Dropbox. And then again, I thought, why am I going to see all these? Like, you guys should be seeing your creativity. You guys should be getting ideas from one another. So that's why I changed that. I wanted to change that into a Dropbox, so you guys can share your creativity and I don't just have the privilege of seeing that, okay? So we have our obligatory 1 Dropbox, and so you can talk about prophets, but you're going to share your creativity about prophets in that. The final one, the writing prophets, the final change, because we made changes to topics 1, 2, and 3, and we kept topic 4, 5, and 6 the way it should be, right? So we didn't touch it, okay? And what I wanted there again was I didn't want like 5 prophets. Okay, let me get through this. Let me write something about 5 prophets. Boy, I really didn't enjoy that activity, right? So this is what I thought we would do. Do a little jigsaw. Taking me back to Teachers College over 30 years ago, and we learned jigsaw. And with Dr. Vermette. Anyways. So I decided to also photocopy for you guys the intro of every one of the prophets that you have to look at, the writing prophets from the Catholic Youth Bible. Okay, so I gave you a head start there, okay? I gave you a little bit more information. Look up some more for yourselves online, see what you can find about the prophets. You're going to be reading in Cooper, so you're going to be reading chapter 10 in Noel Cooper's book. I've got the old edition, right? You get information there. And then I thought, well, do a good job with 1 prophet, right? So that's where this comes in. I took the class list and put you guys into groups, assigned you a prophet, okay? So groups that are groups of 5, everybody gets 1 of each. Some of you, there's groups of 6, so there's going to be 2 people in one group doing 1 prophet. That's fine, not a big deal, right? So there's your groups. So you're going to post on July 22nd your prophet, and then only in the beginning, you could go on and read other people's afterwards, but in the beginning, just like support each other. So read everybody else in your group. So that's why the requirements for this is that you post your prophet, plus post and comment on every member of your group's discussion posts. So you're doing 4. So I should see 4 comments that you're making one to every other prophet. That hopefully makes sense. So at the end, you've learned about 5 prophets. 1 really well that you're the expert in, 4 that you're going to get information from other people in your group. I hope that makes sense. I hope you enjoy that better. A little bit of a group experience, but I think a little more valuable in terms of going through this information, because I'm telling you, the Hebrew scriptures are scripture is difficult. Number 1, and number 2, it is difficult making your way through that part of the Bible. Okay, and then we're left with prophetic women, which I made no changes, and women play a bigger role than we're willing to admit. Let's just say, okay? Because we were there, we supported Jesus to the end, and we were there at the beginning, at the resurrection, and we announced. And if you really look at scripture, some of the key, like even the woman at the well, right? She drops the bucket and goes and proclaims, right? The early church, the first deacons were deaconesses. It was the women, right? The first person that St. Paul baptized into the faith was Lydia. Lydia was the first Baptist, because if we look at St. Paul, if it wasn't for St. Paul, I don't know if we'd have much of like St. Paul was the cheerleader of the church. He was like the one who persecuted Christians and then became the biggest advocate of Christians. And St. Paul's letters and taking it out into the world is what really spread Christianity and started the church. And so Paul baptizes Lydia at the river in Greece. And I told you earlier, when I did my Pauline second and third missionary journey with Father Richard Rohr, we went to the river. And if I remember, I'll post the video of that. And Lydia was the first in that community to be baptized. And of course, after the baptism, they all went to Lydia's house. She cooked a meal. And that was Eucharist. Yeah. And priests in the beginning were married, but because over time it changed, because over land, the church was losing all its land because the kids inherited, and so the church wasn't able to build up. And plus, I know people argue for this, and I'm not going to get into a big one, but too, I think there should be a choice, but to be a priest and to have a family, that would be a heavy balance. Because the priest is on 24/7. They get called in the middle of the night. There's ministry. I just knew as a chaplain, it exhausted me. And I came home depleted because ministry, carrying people, is really, really demanding work. So that is that topic 4. Topic 5 is the prophetic voice of Paul. And so, like I said, Paul was a huge part of starting our faith. And so it's interesting, Paul's conversion story is fundamental. It's, he gets knocked off his horse, blind for 3 days, then he gets his sight back. He was a contemporary of Jesus, but never met him. He met him in the resurrection. So that's pretty significant for our story. Okay, and there's a lot of information. Like if we were to go into a heavy duty morality section in this course, we would focus on the morality of Paul. And I have commentaries on Paul, because when I taught the course in Greece and Turkey, when I took this course on the road, I did a heavy emphasis on Paul because we were in Ephesus. I was at the steps where he made his famous speech, and Ephesus, oh my gosh, Ephesus was brilliant. We went to the Virgin Mary house. It was just such a powerful experience. So I did a lot of work on Paul, and I got to know Paul. So I wasn't a fan of Paul in the beginning, but now that I got to know him, he's a good guy. So, we judge even in Scripture. We judge Scripture, the people in Scripture, and then once you get to know them, it's like, the value. And of course, number 1, Jesus is prophet. And this is where we land, right? And then again, to an extension, those of you who don't have a lot of knowledge about Islam, Muhammad is regarded as the next great prophet after Jesus, right? So they're like, we're the last. Like, it started with Moses, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and then Muhammad came in, and God dictated the Quran to Muhammad, and that's the direct words of God as opposed to the inspired word. Okay, so there's some major differences there. Jesus is regarded as a prophet in the Quran and in the Islamic faith, and Mary is huge in Islam. In fact, she's mentioned more in the Quran than she is in the Christian scriptures. And the Virgin Mary House in Ephesus is a huge pilgrimage site for Muslims. You would never think that, right? Brilliant. So maybe I'll post that video too. Those are all optional. So maybe if I remember, I'll post two videos. One from the river where Lydia was baptized, and one from the Virgin Mary House in Ephesus, Turkey. Okay, so that is the changes in this module. So now I'm going to stop this because it's already 20 minutes, over 20 minutes. And then I'm going to just record another video, and I'm going to do my intro to scripture. So I'll just give you the basics, nuts and bolts of scripture. I've got different books here that I want to share in terms of how to navigate scripture. And then we'll unpack the gospel of the day. But today, when I unpack the gospel of the day, I'm actually going to use a commentary to show you guys how to take scripture and try to understand it when you don't understand it. So I'll make our prayer today a practical experience of that. All right.